Hello, my name is Austin Seibert, and this presentation is about how individuals conform to social pressures. To start, I'd like to briefly identify some factors as to why these studies are important and how they relate to our modern-day society. First, these studies raise many philosophical questions with regards to the idea of free will. For example, one may pose the question, if humans are able to conform this easily to our surroundings, do we truly have free will, or are we just products of what our environment is? The next reason that this is important is that after World War II, Hitler's followers claimed that they didn't do anything wrong. They were simply following orders. To investigate this argument, studies like the Milgram experiment were done to see if this was a possibility. Lastly, these studies gave us further knowledge into how our brain functions, reacts to high-pressure situations. In this experiment, I will be highlighting some of the most prominent psychological studies done that revolve around conforming in a social environment. These studies include the Asch Line test, the Milgram experiment, and the Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1951, Solomon Asch created an experiment that is known as the Asch Line experiment. In this experiment, one individual was selected and 7 others, called stooges, were pre-selected and informed about the experiment. The real participant was under the assumption that 7 other participants were randomly selected just as he had been. Once the experiment began, they were sat down at a large table and shown an image like the one displayed on the left of this line. They were then prompted to state which line was most similar to the target line. 18 different images were shown, and in 12 of them the Stooges gave incorrect answers. Once the experiment was complete, Asch discovered extraordinary results. The results demonstrated that 32% of the participants conformed to what was clearly the incorrect answer, and about 75% of the individuals conformed to at least one. This study was one of the first times psychologists took a serious look into how individuals conform, thus inspiring many more studies to begin being conducted. 10 years later, another famous study was produced at Yale University. Stanley Milgram was interested in if a person would conform to an authority, even if it went against their personal morals. So in 1961, he created an experiment that would test how far people would go in obeying instructions, even if it involved harming another individual. Before the experiment began, participants were asked to draw between learner and teacher. What the participants didn't know was that the drawing was fixed, so they would all draw a teacher. The teacher was instructed to state a list of words, and once the list was read, the teacher was told to give the learner 4 possible lists of words. The learner would then attempt to recall which list was the same as the original. If the learner guessed correct, then the matched list that the teacher gave, they would move on to the next list. However, if the learner guessed incorrectly, the teacher was to administer an electric shock to the listener, increasing the voltage every time they guessed incorrectly. There were 30 switches on the shock generator, marked from 15, which was a slight shock, to 450, marked with the skull and the words danger, severe shock. The learner gave mainly wrong answers on purpose, and for each one of these, the teacher gave him an electric shock. If the teacher refused, the experimenter/individual in authority would tell them they have no choice but to continue for the purpose of the experiment. The results were that 65% of the individuals, aka the teachers, continued to the highest level, 450 volts. All teachers continued to 300 volts. The conclusion was that ordinary people are likely to follow orders given by an authority figure, even to the extent of killing an innocent human being. This is because obedience to authority is ingrained in us from the way that we are brought up in the environments we are raised in. The last experiment that will be discussed occurred in 1971. This experiment was so fascinating that there was a documentary on Netflix about it. The individual that conducted this experiment was Philip Zimbardo, and he was interested in the roles that people play in prison situations. So he created his own prison in the basement of Stanford, where 24 males who were judged to be mentally and physically stable were assigned to be either prisoner or guard. Prisoners were treated like any criminal. They were arrested at their homes and taken to the local police station, where they were fingerprinted, photographed, and booked. After being booked, prisoners were blindfolded and taken to the Stanford basement, which had barred windows, barricaded doors, and small cells. When a prisoner arrived to the prison, they were stripped, given prison clothes, and told that they would be referred to by their number from now on. Guards were given matching uniforms, sunglasses, and were told to do anything they believed necessary to keep order within the prison. Within hours, prisoners started acting like real prisoners, even siding with guards and other prisoners that disobeyed. And guards continuously harassed prisoners. For example, they would make prisoners do push-ups and stand on their backs while they were doing it. Priests that used to visit real prisoners were asked by Zimbardo to come and assess the fake prison. They observed how real and mentally damaging this experiment was. By the sixth day, Zimbardo was forced to shut down the experiment due to excessive mental breakdowns from prisoners and extreme aggression being demonstrated by the guards. This experiment proved that individuals will conform to social roles they are expected to play at an incredible pace, especially if they are in a position of power. To recap, these experiments have raised important psychological questions and allowed us to gain insight on how individuals react in various environments. I suspect that in the future, if psychologists can figure out a way to do these conformity experiments in ethical ways, then the experiment will continue to display fascinating results that will continue to shape our understanding of the brain. Thank you.